In this video, I'm going to be mixing and mastering. It's mostly mixed because I kind of mix as I go, but there are often things that I like to change as I go because let's take part of the song that's on the louder side. So I'm going to loop from here to here, and part of this has an 808, or not an 808, a bass guitar in it, so that's probably the loudest part, but I'm just going to loop, this little 16 bar section. So the way that I master is I take all my sounds, so all my melodies, my 808s, or in this case it's a bass guitar bit, and then all of my drum sounds, and I'm going to put them all on one mixer channel, and then put what I like to call my pre-master channel. I mix and master my beats a little bit differently than I do my songs, because when I'm doing my beats, I am trying to make the beat as loud as I can, basically, without going up to 0. But then when I mix and master with songs, I tend to do a little bit less compression. Songs is because oftentimes I'm using my beats, and I know that I've already compressed the beat itself a pretty good amount, so there's a little bit less that happens. So in my pre-master chain, the first thing I have is an EQ, and then I have 3 instances of Maximus. I'm doing essentially the same thing in every instance of Maximus. It's just multi-band compression. The main difference will be where the bands are placed. So let's look at the first instance of Maximus, and we'll see if we look at the bands. This is basically just the extremes. So 50 hertz and below, and then 10K and above. I will be level matching for the majority of these bands. The exceptions will be on this very first low band, that's 50 hertz and below, and then on all the masters. I'm not going to level match on the low because I'm about to make the low end as loud as I want it for the entire song. And then I won't be level matching on the master because I'm not changing the balance of the song. Let's begin. So when I'm worrying about this 50 hertz and below range, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set a node that's at negative 8.7 decibels. And then I want to make sure that my low end gets at least to that point, but not too much above it. So as you can see, I'm not quite getting up to negative 8.7 decibels. So I'm going to push volume until I am. Okay, and then something else I'm going to do in this 50 hertz and below range is I'm going to do a little bit of an S-curve with the expansion and compression functions that happen here. So I'm going to put a node about as low as it will go, and then I'm going to curve this little line down, and what that's going to do is make it so that anything that's below that red line to the right there will get a little bit quieter. And the reason I'm doing that is because you can see some residual sound coming in that's really, really low. That's likely coming in, from like the melodies or something like that. And I don't really want that at 50 hertz and below. Above 50 hertz is fine, but 50 hertz and below, I kind of want to reserve for like things that are meant to be that low, like kicks, 808s, bass guitars, that sort of thing. So I'm making this quieter stuff a little bit quieter, and then I'm going to do the opposite with everything else and make it a little bit louder. Push this up by 0.8, pull this back by 0.8. Let's go to the highs. Push this up by 0.9, let's pull it back by 0.9. For the master. And again, I'm not going to level match on the master, even though I pushed this up by 1.1 decibels. And that's because I'm not changing the balance of the song at all. So let's go to the next instance of Maximus. And we're going to do the exact same process. The difference will be where the bands are placed. So instead of 50 hertz and below, now I'm at 175 and below. Instead of up by the 10K and above, now I'm at where the 5K is and above. Push this up by 0.9, let's pull it back by 0.9 for the mids. Push this up by 0.5, let's pull it back by 0.5. Let's go to the highs. Pull this down by 1.3, so let's pull this up by 1.3. Go to the master. Push the master up by 0.4. Let's go to our third instance of Maximus. Now, this will be the same process, however, I'm going to set the bands up a little bit differently. So I'm going to solo my mid band, and then I'm going to move these bands in until I can't really hear the kick or bass guitar quite as much anymore. And then I'm going to move this in until I can't really hear any of the hi-hats anymore. However, what I am doing is making sure that the most prominent thing in this range is that main clap or main snare. Okay, I'm going to go back to the mix, and I'm going to turn up my main snare sound, but just like the mid-range of it. Okay, I don't need to push or pull the volume at all. And then I'm going to use the expansion function to make my main snare, clap, rim, whatever I'm using, a little bit louder. Let's go to the highs. I'm okay with compressing the highs a little bit more here because in this case I'm compressing down that main snare. And I'm not really compressing down anything else, at least not too much. And in fact, I'm going to do something alongside the compression. I'm also going to add a little bit of saturation to just the louder stuff. So I'm going to flip back and forth between these two saturation types until I figure out which one I like the sound of better. And then I'm going to mix it back and then put the ceiling, make sure the ceiling is at the appropriate place. Okay, so I like B better. So I'm going to mix B back almost all the way and then move this up a little bit. And I don't need to push or pull the volume at all. Let's go to master. Okay, so I'm pushing this up by 0.5. And then something else I'm going to do, and I think I'm going to do this twice, and this is something that I'm kind of experimenting with, is I've got a node that is about as high as it will go, but not all the way up to where it's being compressed. And I'm going to turn everything that's below that up just a little bit by curving this line up. So what I'm doing is this, but not that extreme. I'm just barely moving it up. So 0.9 something is kind of what I'm shooting for. So 0.96, and if you look in the bottom right, 0.96% is about where I'm shooting. And then I'm going to do this again on the master chain later, which again is something I'm experimenting with. Okay, the next two things in my chain are a patcher preset, or a couple of patcher presets. The first one is for stereo separation. So I'm taking the lows and putting them in mono, putting the highs in the separated field. And then on the other patcher preset, we've got a mid-side EQ. And on just the sides, I'm cutting the sub-bass frequencies, and then I'm also boosting the bass frequencies a little bit. And then on just the mid signal, I've got a limiter, which is adding a little bit of saturation as well as limiting a little bit. And then I have another EQ, which is cutting the low lows as well as the high highs. The next couple of things in my chain are a wave shaper and a limiter. The wave shaper is currently hard clipping, and I'm pushing 5% of volume into this hard clipper. And then I'm hard clipping off some of the signal. And so because I'm hard clipping off a little bit of signal, on the limiter that's after it, I'm actually boosting the volume by 0.3 decibels. And as you can see, I'm not limiting. Even though I'm pushing 0.3 extra decibels of volume, I'm still not limiting. That's because I chopped off a little bit of that signal on the top. Now I'm going to put on my master chain. Okay, so the first couple of things on the master chain are an EQ where I'm cutting the low lows. Then I have a compressor which has these settings, okay? And I usually start with this compressor mixed halfway on, and then later on I'll look at how loud my track is, and if I'm too loud I'll back this off, I'll mix it back, or even turn it off if I'm really loud. And if I'm not loud enough, I'll usually start by mixing this all the way on and then re-gauging the volume, but we'll get there. So the next thing in the chain is a limiter. It's just kind of to observe the signal after the compressor. Then I have a patcher preset and then Maximus again. The patcher preset is doing the same thing as before, where I'm taking the lows and putting them in mono, taking the high frequencies and pushing them out to the sides. In fact, I'm going to do the same thing that I did in the third instance of Maximus, and I'm going to solo the mid band, go to my bands, and then move them until I don't really hear the kick or the 808, as well as until I don't really hear the hats anymore. And then the process will basically be the same. So let's start with the lows. Okay, I'm pushing 0.3 decibels. So let's pull it back by 0.3. Let's go to the mids. Okay, I pulled this back by 0.8. Let's push these up by 0.8. And then I'm going to use the expansion function again to make the main snare just a little bit louder. Let's go to the highs. Okay, I push this up by 0.6. Let's pull it back by 0.6. And then I'm going to add saturation again. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to flip back and forth until I find the one that I like better, and then I'll pick that one. Go to the master and make sure I level matched. Go to the master. Okay, I pushed 0.6 decibels of volume, but again, I'm not going to level match because it's the master. And then I'm going to do the same thing I did before. I've got a note about as high as it will go. That's not all the way up to the top. And then I'm going to push this up until it says 0.9 something. So in this case, 0.92 is good enough. Okay, so the last couple of things in my chain are a soft clipper, a limiter, and a loudness meter. So for the time being, I'm going to turn off the soft clipper, and then I'm going to look at the signal on this limiter and see about how much signal I think I can push into that soft clipper, and then we'll go from there. It might be too much, I don't know. I think I'm going to start with like 1.1. And then if it's too much, I will back it off. If it's not enough, we might push a little bit more. So I'm going to come back to Maximus. I'm going to push 1.1 decibels of volume on the post. And so what's going to happen is I'm going to turn the soft clipper on. 1.1 decibels of volume gets pushed after it goes through Maximus. Then it gets soft clipped, and then we should see it here. Okay, now what I'm going to do is let the beat start from a little bit before when it drops, and then I'm going to let this Uline loudness meter kind of do its thing, and it's going to be telling me a bunch of different numbers. And if it looks like I'm using this tool incorrectly, or if it looks like I could use it in a better way, please let me know down in the comments. But I'm essentially looking at a couple of things. I'm looking at this integrated LUFS, which tells me about how loud the track is overall. I'm looking at the short term as well, just to tell me about how loud things are in the moment. And then I'm looking at the true peak max to try and make sure that my track overall isn't getting up to or above 0. Okay, I'm going to turn the melody down just a little bit. Okay, I can already tell that we're not going to be quite loud enough. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to mix this compressor all the way on. So I think what I'm also going to do is I'm going to come over here to Maximus, and I'm going to push, I think, like 0.1 decibel into the limiter, and then an additional 0.1 after this instance of Maximus, which will get soft clipped off after it. So let's run. I'm going to turn down the bass guitar just a little bit, and then I think I'm happy with the loudness. And I also never got above 0. So yeah, I think that's going to be about it. If you have a question about any part of the process, feel free to throw that down in the comments. Also, like I said, if you have suggestions for how I can use, any of these tools in a better way, feel free to throw that in the comments as well. But yeah, let's listen back to it.